Rachel Barenbaum, author of A Bend in the Stars, and I'm here today with Shayla Lawson, author of This Is Major. This book was so incredible, I could not put it down. Shayla, tell us, what is your book about?
I wrote a book of essays about Black women and femmes and girls and just looking at the culture and bringing them back into the major canon.
This book deals with a lot of serious topics. What was the hardest thing that you had to write about?
I think the hardest thing for me was of trying to make it as inclusive as possible because there's just so much to write about. And I feel there are still so many places that I could explore when it comes to the story of Black girls and how they're reshaping the world. Within the book, I write a lot of names. I shout out a lot of people. I write a lot of essays about music and musicians. So I write about SZA and I write about Diana Ross, who's in the subhead of the book, and I write about Nina Simone. But I just, in being as inclusive as possible and trying to shout out as many people as possible, I just realized there's so many people that I've missed. There's so many, especially when I look at the time that we're in now, there's so many activists that I've missed. There's so many definitions of the ways that we start to look at femininity that I could have delved deeper in. So this is really just a start for me in a catalog that will probably continue to expand on a lot of stories.
While the essays in this book were so powerful and fabulous, the one thing that really haunted me was the introduction. And at one point you talked about going to a neighbor's house, a white neighbor's house, where the father is a policeman, and her parents are asking you about your house, like the physical part of your house. Did you have a coffee table? Like they wanted to know how a Black girl lives in a house like theirs next to them. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, because I think one of the things that's significant about that scene is also the fact that my father is a doctor. My father is a physician. So we were an upper class family. My father was doing his medical residency at the time. So my parents didn't have a lot of money, but were definitely upwardly mobile, living next to a blue collar family, police work still being a much more blue collar profession. And that family happened to be white. So there was some conflict for them about what it meant to be in proximity to a Blackness that would supersede them in terms of certain financial advantages and ways that people think about privilege. So one of their ways of managing that was to ask me about things that I had access to. So things that I had in my house, which I find pretty typical of the way that white culture addresses Blackness. That's where we get this framework of white supremacy that is the topic du jour at the moment. White supremacy involves the idea that white people, just by virtue of being white, have access to things that non-white people do not. And the expectation is that irrespective of what you've done as a person of color, you're still going to be at a disadvantage because that's the way that America is set up. So the whole essay is about the fabrication of American history and American identity that at its root cause is trying to suppress the major contributions that anyone other than whiteness has made to our American society.
How do you feel about your book publishing now, given the current political climate?
Well, I wrote it because the political climate hasn't changed. It's hard to say when are we supposed to go back in American history and say that these haven't been issues. My book happens to be timely to people right now because of the time that it's coming out, but I couldn't have predicted that this is the way that America would be responding to this particular time. But in a certain respect, I could definitely read the room because there has been very little about the story of racism and anti-Blackness in America that has changed over the past 400 years. The small incremental changes that we've seen don't add up to equality. And one of the things that matters to me a lot is a quote that I found from Toni Morrison that says, racists will always make you think that they're the majority, but they never are. And so I wanted to write a book that honored the fact that that is a timeless conversation. It's not indicative of a moment. It's something that we all need to be striving for because citizenship is not the privilege of a small group of people. It belongs to all of us as humans. And I just wanted to start with Black girls because it was a place that I felt very close to, and it was a place that I could write from my own personal experience of what that alienation feels like.
What do you want people to take away from This Is Major?
I think the best takeaway from This Is Major is that the book is really funny. It's hard to communicate that in a conversation like this because it is really serious, the things that we're talking about. We're talking about discrimination and misogyny, and kind of taking down the white supremacist patriarchy is a big part of the conversation of this book. Those are serious things, but the way that I have told the stories in them are a lot like if you and I sat in a car and we were on a very long road trip and we have the music going and we just talk through a lot of things that that are going on in the world. So the fact that it's funny is one of the things that I'm most proud of.
How can we move the conversation about race forward?
I think the best way for us to move the conversation forward is to keep having it. A lot of us tend to let these things fall out of our timelines and then fall out of our activism. And that's something that we just can't afford to do anymore. We can't get complacent. We can't get lazy. We need to continually think about how important it is to treat people better.
Shayla, thank you so much for your time. I love the book. I want everybody to go out and buy it and read it. May you sell many, many copies.
I hope so. Thank you so much.